Hi folks, we turn the sound music down a bit. Welcome to another edition of the Omnist Hour. Today's subject I'm going to title The Game of Souls and the Republic of the Multiverse. I'm going to try to lay out for you how this whole physical incarnation system works and how it ties into what goes on in the spiritual world. Probably repeating some things I've said before, but maybe in a new context, giving you a little more sense of how to play the game. Whatever game you want to play during the infinite lifetime of your soul. Okay, let's turn that sound down, that music down just a little bit more. Okay, so what is the Game of Souls? And why do I call it a game? Good questions. Okay, as we discussed before, the physical realms of the multiverse are simulations. They're very real simulations. And anyone who's played a very, very realistic video game knows just how engrossed you can get in that. And in fact, the tech world is now approaching the idea of virtual worlds that are so engrossing, so encompassing, that there's now worry that people will completely disconnect into these alternate realities that they're creating, the metaverse. And it's a huge topic of debate and discussion right now. And effectively, this is evidence that the physical world that we're living in, this Gaia experiment that humanity is key to, is creating the exact system that was already envisioned by God. Now, these creators at Facebook and other companies who are desperately trying to make money off the metaverse are a far cry from the creators' vision of these things. Why? Those folks are pursuing it from a standpoint of physical values, not spiritual values. In the physical world, money is everything. Power, influence, controlling the eyeballs and the pocketbooks of humanity is where it's all at in the physical world. And that's a far cry from where one would need to be to have a healthy spiritual world. And that disconnect between the physical and the spiritual is proof that this plan, this divine plan of reining in souls, as I've said many times, souls are pure consciousness, individual units of consciousness which are free to think and to imagine anything that they want. And a long period of experience with many souls imagining and thinking without boundaries, without any way of checking if their thoughts were logically consistent, spiritually productive, physically productive, is what drove the creators to create bounded systems, the bounded systems that we perceive as physical realms. And as modern creators of technology are discovering, in order to get people to use your technology, to get them to sign up for the game, if you will, you've got to make it engaging. Got to make it rewarding. Okay, engaging and rewarding human beings who are stuck in a very physical perception of their existence requires monetary resource rewards, and also spiritual rewards, making people feel good. Feelings are spiritual. And they can be manipulated and controlled. And as I've told you, when the game started, it was very unfair. Those who had the most experience, the most knowledge, the most influence, those souls had incredible power. And as we know, with power comes the temptation to misuse power. And without any system of checks, the old gods became very, very powerful and manipulative of younger souls. And if you search back through the memories of our species, you will see evidence of that in the legends of a time of gods, a time of heroes, a time of god kings and hero kings who exerted immense power and influence, for better or worse, because they were individual souls with individual histories. And just because you were the son of Zeus and Hera, some high gods, didn't mean that you were necessarily the sharpest soul in the shed. And in order to get players to sign up for the Game of Souls, the first versions had to be very enticing, to give physically incarnated souls, especially these old experienced ones that had gotten a taste of power and influence and were reluctant to let go of that, to get them to incarnate, to get them involved in the game, and to get them to forget the fact that at the back of the whole idea behind this physical incarnation game was the idea that we need to level the playing field. And that is something that maybe is counterintuitive to what you think a god might want to do. Why would a god willingly give up power? It's a difficult decision, and one that I think the first creator contemplated before creating or instantiating another consciousness to share part of the load, to co-process, to co-create, to evaluate, to get a second opinion. And why else would an all-powerful creator create anything? Unless it was just an act of mental masturbation. And I don't think any god worth their salt would spend eternity mentally masturbating himself. which is the way some people envision God and the physical experience. This is the fallacy of these folks that say, oh, I'm just a part of God experiencing this incarnation that I've taken. It makes no sense. It serves no purpose. And it's all part and parcel of this huge fallacy that everything is already perfect, which comes out of the idiocy of the Bible, an idiotic interpretation of the 7 days of creation, which we've talked about. Okay? No scientific, rational discussion of creation would conclude that, oh, I made everything perfect, we have nothing more to do. It's inconsistent with science. It's inconsistent with everything we've observed about evolution and everything we've observed about how the universe works. As is the idea that, somehow the second law of thermodynamics is going to eventually win and destroy all the order that we see in the universe. That's absurd. It is completely illogical, and those that argue that there is no creative force that's bringing order to the multiverse are fools. They're just as stupid as the folks that think there's some almighty God micromanaging everything, the whims of their slavishly devoted worshipers. That's absurd. It's nuts. And this kind of nuttiness is common among low-level souls who are just trying to figure things out for the first time. And it's encouraged by slightly higher level souls because it's easy to manipulate other souls if you get them into this mindset. Because this mindset of some all-powerful force that's in control is exactly the mindset that they want you to have, and map that power and control and this God presence to their scheme of authoritarian control in the physical world. And every religion, every ideology, every political movement has been about getting power, getting control, becoming the God of humanity, at least in a local sense. And that's not, in any way, shape, or form, bringing you closer to God. All it is doing is teaching you the lessons that anti-gods have to learn before they can become senior creators. Okay, so this game of souls that we've got that fall into this set of laws that govern reincarnation and karma. Okay? Incarnation is not only something that happens in human form. You can incarnate, souls incarnate in all sorts of soul vehicles. And the number and type of soul vehicles changes. This is the spiritual evolution of the game of souls. Okay? And it's very much like a role-playing game that we're familiar with. You have new character classes. You maybe have some classes that are only, you've got, at the beginning level, you have to choose from these classes. And if you advance to a certain point, you get to move on to another class, another vehicle. This is exactly how it works. Now, some souls start out as the avatar of some very mundane physical thing. A proton, a neutron, an electron, even more basic things. And those very basic souls, vehicles, have a very limited level of consciousness, very limited set of decisions they can make. And who knows what decisions end up elevating them to being able to incarnate at the next level of soul development. The reward systems, I don't know. It's been a long time since I was an elementary particle. Or at least as far as I can remember. I've been a lot of other things in my soul's history. Got a fast backward tour of that one night. And some pretty strange vehicles I've occupied throughout the millennia. So, what I'm telling you is that if you're in a human form, you're driving one of the most complex soul vehicles there is. Why does it need to be that complex? Because soul vehicles are training wheels. Physical incarnations are training to help you become a better spirit in the spiritual world. Think about it. Imagine if you were a disembodied consciousness and you were able to think anything, imagine anything, manifest anything as the first creator, and however many children he created until they decided they needed to have some boundaries around what was going on. You could easily drive yourself crazy. And they did. Literally. Because the essence of the soul is consciousness. And consciousness is, at least in its higher forms, very close to what we imagine as the human experience. The full range of emotions, the full range of opportunities, temptations, is all there. And then some at this pure consciousness level. And that's the whole reason that the Game of Souls was developed. It's not punishment. It's not a prison. Any more than your toddler's playpen is a prison. And it's what you make of it and what others force you into that give it that prison aspect. It's not a feature of the game itself. And the essence of human organization, as it's developed, along with the more subtle rules of this Game of Souls, is what guides, what has guided all of the little corollaries and details of the game as it applies to humanity and as it will apply to other species once they come under the rule of karma. How does that happen? Okay, so we need to understand what the multiverse is. What is all of creation? And the best way that I can explain it is through the language of fractals. Okay, if you don't know what a fractal is, there are plenty of good presentations out there to study what is a fractal and how does it reflect the patterns, the organization we see in nature. Fundamentally, a fractal is an equation that describes the structure of space-time within a single universe, within multiple universes, within 4 dimensions, within 12 dimensions. There is no inherent boundary to how complicated this fractal could be. And essentially, the fractal can change through the actions, through the thought of individual consciousnesses, which are the embodiment of some portion of the fractal. Okay, so you could envision this Gaia experiment as a fractal of a grand fractal pattern that pervades the entire multiverse. That grand pattern reflects the last established set of rules for the multiverse. Now, how do we establish a set of rules for the multiverse? As I've discussed with you, it's done through spiritual science. The senior creators, the ones who are fully aware of what's going on with the multiverse and are active creators in it, not partially aware passive creators as all incarnated humans are. Even the very experienced souls that come to human form have to go through the baby steps of reawakening their consciousness. That's the beauty of the system. That's how it levels the playing field for young souls. So, let's see, where was I going with that thought? Oh, I wish I had somebody on here with me who could kind of poke me and prod me in the right direction. My kingdom for a co-host. Anyway, the Game of Souls has multiple levels. Each soul vehicle of whatever complexity participates in this game within a certain range of levels. So if you're an elementary particle, you are essentially participating at, let's say, 0 level of consciousness. You have decisions forced upon you by other portions of the multiverse, forcing you to, observing you. Mr. Particle, you must decide if you are spin up, spin down. And that decision is going to stick with you until something alters your spin. And you start interacting with the multiverse in a very simplistic way, in a way that's very much consistent with what we have observed as the laws of quantum mechanics. And at some point, souls incarnated at that level get an opportunity to participate in another soul vehicle. How does that happen? I don't know the exact details. I'll leave it up to some advanced spiritual scientists to research that and see at what point does an elementary particle get to disengage from its experience and move on to a different soul vehicle. This is all part and parcel of the research that's going on in quantum entanglement. How long does a tangle between particles persist? When do they get to remove this entanglement and move on to something else? Or turn over that entanglement to some other soul and move on to something more fun? There's some mechanism, some connecting point that allows souls to move from these very basic vehicles to more advanced vehicles. And at some point, you get a chance to try vehicles like being the soul of a plant, being the soul of an animal, a lesser animal that maybe doesn't have the consciousness capability of a vehicle like a human. After you've played the human game for a while, you may move on to another soul vehicle that has a different focus, a different range of consciousness, a different kind of experience that is tuned for a different role in the multiverse. The human vehicle is unique, in my experience, in having the capacity to develop talents and skills and abilities, self-awareness that can go in almost any direction. And that's what makes our species so special. And also what makes it so dangerous to itself, maybe to other species. But that's the whole point of this exercise of the development of this species. The development of this species has been the culmination of the biggest experiment in spiritual science ever. The combination of many other experiments that resulted in many other species that are still out there coursing through the multiverse with their own set of accomplishments, drawbacks, challenges, levels of consciousness which they have attained or can attain in their current form. And if you are open to exploring past life experiences, near-death experiences of people, the spiritual experiences of people who have touched these other species, these other worlds, these other soul vehicles, you will come away with an understanding that we are in a very special time, and many, many, many souls want to be in human form on this planet at this special time. I encourage you to start with the work of Dr. Ian Stevenson on reincarnation, which to my lights essentially proves that reincarnation is absolutely the real deal. Move from there to accepting, yes, past life recollections are real, are experiences that we have had. Acknowledge from there that past life experiences that are recalled through spiritual practice, through psychotropic substances, particularly plants, that seem to have a propensity for helping humans recall their past. Things like ayahuasca. And hypnotic states that can, if properly done by a talented professional, can bring back these memories of past lives which are deeply embedded in our soul's greater consciousness, of which we only experience a fraction in any incarnation, without these additional experiences, you will come to understand that there is a pattern here. I very much encourage you to study the work of Dolores Cannon, who pioneered basically the hypnotic technique of past life regression. I would be cautious delving into that area to, well, like any paranormal experience, the people that have the ability to delve into the paranormal have the propensity to misuse it, abuse it for the pursuit of their own power, their own influence. And this is something you're going to have to deal with, no matter how you navigate the game of souls. There will be souls that will help you on your path. There will be souls that will get in your way. There will be souls that teach you useful knowledge about yourself and your own path. And there will be others that will mislead you, either intentionally or even accidentally, because of their particular prejudices, their particular desires, their particular worldview, multiverse view, if you will, if you want to think in a larger sense. And I think fundamentally you've got to decide what's useful, what isn't. And ultimately, your ability to decide for yourself is what free will is all about. And to the extent that you abdicate your free will, your decisions, your worldview to someone else, you are taking the risk of stunting your own personal growth as a soul, of perhaps wasting this incarnation, pursuing something that is inconsistent with the direction that your soul is gravitating towards moving. And to that extent, any spiritual influence you have, any mentor, any guru, any government, any teacher, any parent has the potential to speed you up or slow you down. And ultimately, it's only you that can decide what is helpful. Your decisions in each incarnation are the essence of how you play the game of souls. And you can look at it as, geez, this is too tough. I'm just going to zone out and go down this path. And that's essentially what many people do who follow the Buddhist teaching, who follow, say, the communist ideology. I don't really matter as an individual. Every time I make individual decisions, I end up screwing things up, so I'm just going to go with the flow. I'm going to turn over my thoughts, my decisions, to what I think is a higher power. And to some extent, we all do that in at least some aspects of our life. If you try to make decisions for yourself about everything, you're going to be constantly in a quandary about what to do next. You have to make some assumptions about how the world works in order to have any chance of charting a course through it. And those assumptions will change depending on the parameters of your incarnation. The path of somebody born to a poor family in Indonesia, for example, where I'm currently living and experiencing, and the decisions and trajectory of somebody born to a poor family in China would be very different. One is a traditionally Muslim culture with a strong legacy of Hindu tradition and the tribal tradition of island people. The other is very much the outgrowth of 100 years of communist rule, Marxist thinking with Chinese characteristics, with Mao characteristics, with Xi Jinping characteristics. And what seems right to do, what seems productive, is going to be very different if you're a soul born in these two environments or any of the other microcultures that exist across the planet. And this is the essence of the conflict that we're experiencing now, is that these microcultures, which used to be able to exist pretty much independently of each other, are coming into conflict because of the internet, because of social media. The separation between these cultures is no longer easy to maintain. And this is most challenging for those in positions of power. And this is why you see not only China, but even pretty much every country, every polity on this planet trying to isolate itself from what it sees as dangerous influences outside on the open internet or within in the countries that have more free internet. And this struggle between authoritarianism and freedomism is only going to get more severe. And it's a key part of what's going on here. The soul vehicle that humanity has evolved to become in the presence of technology is transcending the point where it is a very useful vehicle for very naive, very inexperienced souls to occupy. And what is coming for this species is kind of a moment of truth. What will happen with that moment of truth? I don't know. It may be that the human species diverges into two distinct species, one of which is more of a hive mind, just do what you're told, almost autopilot driven soul vehicle, which is more of a beast than what we have come to associate with a human. And maybe to some way of thinking, that is essentially what the mark of the beast is. To be taking on a position that takes your soul into this path of, you know what, I just want to be part of the machine. I just want to be a cog in this machine and feel like I'm contributing, I'm doing my job, I'm doing what I'm told, I'm being productive in the way that they tell me is being productive. And to the extent that that creates solid substrate for the species to continue, that's not necessarily a bad thing. if you think of the grand scheme of things, 99.9% of what has happened in the denouement of the Gaia experiment, which is part of a larger experiment that started with the formation of is an experiment, a collection of experiments, which is conveniently isolated from the experiments of other galaxies. This is why the Earth is in this obscure spiral arm of the Milky Way and not at the center. If you're going to do a dangerous experiment, you want a class 5 lab to do it in, and that's essentially what this solar system has become. A very highly contained lab for doing spiritual experiments. As that experiment concludes, and as I've told you, it has, this new law of karma has been tested and refined enough that it needs to now go into full implementation. The parameters are going to change, and the role of humanity going forward is going to change. It doesn't need to be the driver of spiritual technology. It needs to be the spreader of it. How is it going to spread this spiritual technology? Well, naturally it's going to use the other technologies it has developed. To the extent that these other technologies facilitate the spread of the spiritual technology, they will be encouraged and they will be accepted by the greater multiverse as part of the plan. Is it going to be easy? No, of course not. Just as there were forces all throughout the Gaia experiment pushing against it, saying, I don't want this new karma thing. It restricts me too much. I want things the way they were. I want to be this all-powerful God that can just diddle my fingers and have these lower animals dance to my tune. It was better then. And there are many, many, many souls out there, incarnated in other forms, that still think like that. And the experiences we have with what we think of as aliens, what we think of as spiritual entities, guides, demons, ghosts, they're all part of that. And they're all playing their own role in their own way, in their own soul vehicles. And essentially, being in a spiritual form is just another vehicle. There's nothing completely different about what happens when you go to heaven and you're in a disembodied form for a while. Those disembodied forms have their own rules, their own vehicles. That's why there are angels of the Christian persuasion who are counselors and guides and messengers to those of Christian tendency. And there are ones that cater to an Islamic audience. There are ones that cater to a Hindu audience. There are ones that cater to atheist audiences and give them inspirations that they think, oh, my idea was so wonderful. I am so perfect. There doesn't need to be a God because I am God. I am so intelligent and smart. This is the essence of atheist thought. It's all part of the game of souls. And all of these are thought patterns, these groupings, these collectives that you might join and participate in for a while are useful to the extent that they teach souls the lessons they need to learn to move on to a higher level of consciousness. And there is no one, no soul at a high level of consciousness that would want to destroy a religion, destroy an ideology, destroy a political party, destroy anything. The highest levels of consciousness are about influence, about subtle change, about using and reusing all the infrastructure that has come before in all the experiments ever conducted by all the senior creators. Now, a lot of that useful technology has come through the experiments that were inspired or directly proposed by the senior creator, the original senior creator, God. That's why God has so much influence. Not power, influence. Because that's what counts in the spiritual world. Power is a manifestation. In the physical world, you're allowed to manifest power as a challenge to yourself. The power that you accumulate in the physical world does not equate to any kind of power in the spiritual world. In fact, almost the reverse is true. Those who acquire the most power, the most influence in the physical world, tend to be the ones who are the least influential, the least popular souls in heaven. Why? Because they're the ones who have succumbed to temptation, who have succumbed to the temptation to view the physical, the material world, as more important than the spiritual world. And that is the most fundamentally low consciousness thing you can do. Now, it's inevitable to identify with the material world. It's inevitable to want to do good for the souls that you feel affinity for the groups you feel affinity for. That's natural. There's nothing wrong with that. The problems come when you allow that to overshadow any concern for the development of your own soul. If you think you've hit the pinnacle of soul achievement in physical incarnation, you have essentially fallen off the bandwagon of trying to become a god, because the God levels are spiritual levels. Yes, God's incarnate, and as I've told you, this whole process of implementing karma has been the result of God himself and all the senior creators agreeing to taste their own dog food. Okay, this harmony idea is so great, you do it too. You go see if you can rise to the highest God level again in your own system. Now that's skin in the game, and that's what's going on here. And that's why it's taken so long, why we've experienced so much pain and suffering and heartache in the process. And why there will be more pain and heartache and suffering, because this is what you have to go through to learn to be a senior creator, to learn to be a responsible creator. And yeah, you can try to find shortcuts. And to the extent that any spiritual practice works, any spiritual enhancement works, any technique of recalling past lives allow you to progress faster, Yeah, that's essential, but it comes with a risk, a price, and there's no avoiding the cost of rising to the highest spiritual levels. It's not an easy process, and go look at the true writings about any spiritual figure that has achieved any level of consciousness, higher consciousness, whether it be Buddha, whether it be Moses, any of the other prophets, Hercules, Gilgamesh. Look in any tradition and you will see that there's a common theme of alternately achieving a certain level of awareness of power and then having it backfire on you. Being tempted. Temptations are a part of every spiritual journey. And how we deal with those temptations, if we can get past them, is how we advance. There is no advancement without facing temptation. Anybody that tells you you can get enlightenment by doing meditation, by just following their 12-step program to nirvana, is lying to you. They may be doing it very, very well-meaningly because they've reached a certain place in their spiritual advancement where they're comfortable with where they're at. They don't feel any need to cross any more boundaries, to learn anything more. And that's essentially the point at which Buddha got. At the end of his life, decided, you know what? I'm just going to sit here under the Bodhi tree and exist and wait for nirvana. Or maybe call this nirvana. Okay, that's a choice. And to the extent that that inspires others to maybe defer acting upon their darker nature, it could be something good, but it's something of a sacrifice for a, quote, greater good. And who's to say that the greater good isn't served better in the long run by dealing with your dark side, your dark nature, head on, instead of sublimating it for the greater good. So as you think about what I'm talking about here, think about your path in the game of souls. And I want you to know that heaven is a republic. It's maybe you could view it as a United States of consciousness, governed by a constitution which is effectively the current state of the grand fractal of the multiverse. And that constitution has local variations, which are the individual experiments being conducted by souls or groups of souls in various localized spots of the multiverse, both physical areas and spiritual areas. The spiritual areas are where grand experiments are thought out, are planned, are voted on by higher level souls who are more aware, more conscious of creation than certainly any of us in human form are. And ideas that have been tried before don't get tried at the spiritual level. You only have to create one hive-minded species to know what the pluses and minuses of a hive mind are. How able they are to create new technologies, to adapt to new environments, how susceptible they are to destruction by unexpected perturbations. And you have a perfect example of the weaknesses of hive minds with what's going on with the bee population globally now. The hive collapse disorder, which has overtaken the bee population. Is it human caused? Yes. But it is a good illustration of the downside of hive species, of species who abdicate their choices, their free will to a higher power. It's a good example of what happens when those who have abdicated to this god, the hive queen, deal with running into another hive. Maybe the same species or a different species who are competing for the same turf. And I don't know, if anybody that's been around bees and sees what they can get up to if they feel threatened, if the queen feels threatened, it's pretty frightening. Or ants for that matter. Hive species are among the most violent, mindlessly violent species ever evolved. Now, that doesn't mean they aren't useful. And a large fraction of how the plant world on our planet works is dependent upon these hive species, especially the bees. They're very great pollinators. It's very easy to get your males and females to reproduce, even though they're sitting in their own soil somewhere, by attracting bees. And this is essentially why hive species still exist, because they can be incredibly useful tools for higher consciousnesses. And that's the essence of what's going on at a macro level with the hive species that is working on human minds, trying to encourage them to turn over their consciousness to a higher power. This is happening at multiple levels and with multiple agents who want to harness the spiritual energy of humanity for what they consider a higher purpose. Now imagine what that higher purpose is if those mind manipulators are another species, a hive-minded species, perhaps from an earlier experiment, who might seem to be at odds with what humanity wants, but who may be a pawn in a bigger game that they don't even have any idea of. Imagine, if you will, a species that developed somewhat similarly to humanity, but at some point went through this challenge of, you know what, we've got so much technology here, we're doing so many things ourselves, all these superstitions we used to have about God and higher powers and stuff, that's all bullshit. We're just going to worship ourselves and our own leaders. To the extent that over many generations, those leaders exerted such a great degree of spiritual influence that they essentially became the hive queens of an entire species, perhaps which had the technology to communicate telepathically across great distances. Now, one might think, oh, that's a very powerful species. If we're up against something like that as humanity, we have no chance. But remember that such a species has all of the same drawbacks, shortcomings, as a colony of bees. And in fact, they may already be suffering from colony collapse disorder. And their leaders, who probably know a lot more than they're letting on to any of their soldiers, lieutenants, generals, what the real score is, they're already planning for a future that is going to hopefully recover their hive. And in fact, that hive recovery involves their buy-in, their skin in the game in this Gaia experiment. Okay? Think about it. How are you going to keep all different kinds of marauding species, self-serving species, from interfering with this experiment? If there are other spacefaring, if there are other more technologically advanced species than humans, how were we able to keep isolated for so long? Take some pretty powerful friends to keep others at bay. Why is it that we seem to be suddenly experiencing much greater influence from these outside forces? Many different factions of them, in fact, who are working both physically and spiritually. Some are working through sending souls of their persuasion for the first time into a human vehicle. There are many, many, many humans, especially in the younger generations, who are having a very rough time adapting to the human form, and who will discover when they do past life regressions that, oh, no wonder I'm having such a difficult time in this human form. I came from this other race. That's where I've been doing all my incarnations, and this is a very common phenomenon. So common that you can't just dismiss it as a fantasy any more than you can dismiss the commonalities of thousands and thousands of years of human spiritual experience as mythology. Yes, there are stretches of the imagination, and there are folks that will stretch the truth or alter the truth for personal gain and benefit. And virtually every religion, every spiritual movement that is organized is masterminded by a soul, a person, a group of people who see it as an avenue to power, to earthly power, to control and direction of the human species from a material standpoint instead of a spiritual standpoint, has lost their way, has lost the magic sauce. Now they're still doing things that are useful. Don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with pursuing ambition, pursuing progress from a material standpoint. But it's only the lessons you learn from that that are actually ever going to be of use to you from a spiritual standpoint. So, do what you feel motivated to do, follow who you feel motivated to do. But I hope you will consider that until you connect that with the spiritual, you're not going to have any idea how successful you really have been in this incarnation. And the vast majority of souls incarnated in human form today are not going to have any idea of what they really accomplished in life until they go through the death experience, till they have their life review, till they visit the heaven of their choosing and get counseled on what they need to do in the next life, where they could go in the next life, what options they will have. And some people may tell you, oh, when I reincarnate, I can choose everything. I get all the choices. I can do anything I want. That's not true. This is bullshit. And the folks telling you that, well, it's maybe part true, because there are some higher level souls who get more choices. And certainly once you reach the God levels, you have increasingly carte blanche in choosing your incarnation. Why? Because at the God level, you are consciously aware of having your own universe of creation. And you are allowed to consciously decide whether you want to create in that universe or whether you want to contribute to God's universe, the prime universe, or the universes of any other senior creator, if they let you. So, advancing to the God level comes with risks and rewards. If your idea of perfection is getting to live in an unlimited virtual reality of your own creating, then you're going to be a very lonely God. And that's fine. Lonely gods create structure in the universe, create places that can be visited in dreams, in altered states, when you're on a strange LSD trip that can be instructive, can scare the bejesus out of a soul and drive them towards embracing Christianity for a while, embracing Islam. Maybe just what they needed on their path, the direction, the guidance that they needed to get them back onto a path of their own choosing and not one that's been thrust upon them by commercial advertising or propaganda. And there's nobody that can look at the state of technology, the state of world government, if you will, or the attempt to govern the world through technology, that can say that it's not something that could be very, very evil very, very distracting for many souls. This is a challenge. And the metaverse is going to be, to some extent, the culmination of that challenge. When the metaverse is perfected, and it's not going to happen overnight, and there's going to be many gyrations, and I have no doubt that when it's finally comes to the point of the main player of metaverse, it's not going to be Facebook, not going to be any of the current names of big names of technology. It's going to sneak up on the world like other major technology shifts have, and conquer it in a way that will surprise you. And when it does, my prediction is that this metaverse will take on essentially all the attributes of the law of karma as it's defined for the spirit world, as above, so below. That in fact what will develop is that there will be some people who will basically disconnect into the metaverse to the greatest extent they can and become part of what is essentially a hive mind that provides spiritual energy that drives technology, that produces collective ideas that most of which are going to be absolute trash, but some of which will prove to have certain uses in the greater technological world. And some of the souls that disconnect into the metaverse are going to benefit by it, and they're going to be inspired. They're going to suddenly get an idea that, wow, this is something that I could take out into the real world, the real physical world, and build into something that somehow advances the state of humanity. And some of those ideas will be spiritually useful, others will be spiritual dead ends. And ultimately, all will conduce to spreading what is the essence of the karma system to the rest of the multiverse. Will it happen through humans going out into space? Maybe not. It might happen through some other species coming in and seeing what humanity has done, seeing the records of our civilization, seeing what's recorded of it, which I can tell you that if you think the Chinese Communist Party or the NSA or Facebook or anybody else has a lot of eyes on you, you haven't seen nothing of what is possible with spiritual technology. And this entire Gaia experiment has been widely watched and viewed from every which angle there is. It's the most popular reality show in heaven for souls of a certain level. And reruns, clips of this reality show are what is widely used by the spiritual counselors of different heavens. Christian heaven, the Mormon heaven is very famous for that, in fact. They're all moving along at their own rate of integrating these new modes of spiritual transmission. And that's essentially what all communication technology is a vehicle of spiritual energy exchange. And the mechanisms of that energy exchange are more powerful in the spirit world, but they are coming to conform to the new law, the new restrictions. And so as the metaverse develops down here, as the internet matures down here, there is a spiritual metaverse, a spiritual internet that is being refined and extended, reflected in both directions through the spiritual energies involved. Things that don't work generate energies that find themselves attracted away from God's universe to other universes. Nothing gets wasted. Everything is used, if only as an object lesson on what doesn't work. So, if you have any desire to play on God's team, which you don't have to, frankly, souls learn more from negative lessons than they do from positive ones. And if you don't believe that, you only have to really take a good hard look at the life of anybody that has accomplished something special that is remembered by humanity for centuries afterwards. Hard lessons teach you the most. The school of hard knocks is the one you're going to learn the most from. No matter what namby-pamby, love, peace, harmony, oneness, bullshit people feed you. That's not a path to learning. It's not a path to growth. It's not a path to creation. It's not a path to evolution. It's a path to stagnation. It's useful. Stagnant things are useful. This is what allows worlds to be prepared for new experiments. And yes, worlds have to be prepared for major experiments, and it takes a long time to prepare a world. And that's why we've developed technologies like DNA, where we can seed worlds with certain DNA and then activate it using cosmic rays, using spiritual energies. There are incredible amounts of capability embedded within our DNA, embedded within the DNA of all the other species on the planet, on other planets, all over the multiverse. And those activation mechanisms are what allow us to do experiments faster. And it's taken a long time to get to where we can do that. It's taken the mixing of many, many experiments on many, many different planets to come together to this. And yes, part of what has been going on with extraterrestrial visitations has been the preservation of DNA. Because other species know that cataclysms happen, that through one mechanism or another, any species is subject to extinction. And until the human species, the other species, unique species of this world, are preserved in multiple copies elsewhere, they are subject to deletion from this timeline, this version of the multiverse, of this particular universe. I can't tell you for sure if humanity is going to be useful in God's universe forever. or even the next 100 years. I couldn't guarantee that. It will be preserved somewhere, and if it's ever needed again, it can be recreated. I like this species. I'd like it to continue to grow, evolve, and develop. I think it's got a lot of potential. I think even the most advanced species out there could learn something from humanity. We've created incredible works of art, incredible beauty, ideas that, even if they're fantastical and unrealistic, are quite attractive, quite engaging, and thought-provoking. And this is what humanity was designed to do. We were designed to be a soul vehicle that fosters creativity, that makes creators, good and bad. And creators are teachers. They create bad things that teach bad lessons, like communism. And yes, it is a very bad idea to think that one party is going to make things perfect for a whole country, for a whole world, for a diverse population. That's insane. It's a truly insane idea. And it keeps re-emerging in new forms through, okay, it didn't work as pure Marxism, the bourgeoisie versus the elite, or the bourgeoisie versus the proletariat is the breakdown of the oppressor. Communism is all about creating oppressors, mapping oppression to one particular avenue of attack, and then having the oppressed go and attack them. And the whole point of communism is to destabilize whatever government you have, without really providing for anything to replace it except whatever party emerges victorious from a revolution, which is certain to be dominated by sociopathic megalomaniacs who are pursuing power for their own ends. And every single communist revolution, every single socialist revolution, every single nationalist revolution has been led by people who don't deserve power, who don't know how to use it, who are going to abuse it the first chance they get. And they're being encouraged by others who have power in the financial institutions, the media institutions, the technological institutions of the world, who use their power in the shadows to control other people so they can get what they want. And that's basically been humanity's attempt to make themselves gods up to this point, has been to try to accumulate as much power as possible without having to seem to be the power behind the throne, the puppet master that pulls all the strings. And if you look at every ideological, religious movement, political movement in the history of mankind thus far, it's all been about wanting to be one of those puppet masters, wanting to come up with a way of coordinating between the puppet masters to have a pecking order leading up to the Godfather, of humanity. Okay? This concept of a Godfather as a materialist construct is what's wrong with humanity. Because any conception of a Godfather that doesn't look to the real Godfather, the first soul, the first creator, is going to be creating God in your image, in direct controversion to the truth that you were created in God's image. You were created as an independent consciousness, an independent soul, free to chart its own course through many lives. I don't know how many ways I can tell you that if you go against the natural laws of the multiverse, you're going to be butting your head against stuff that doesn't work, that just flat out is not going to produce stable, enduring creations. It's going to have a brief lifetime somewhere, somewhen. Maybe you'll get to pound your chest for a few lifetimes in some civilization somewhere and say, look what I did. All you'll be doing is repeating a failed experiment that somebody else has already tried every which way from Sunday, and it didn't work. It ended up in maybe something that was stable for 1 billion years, but then couldn't adapt to the impact of another galaxy. A new influx of cosmic radiation from somewhere that disrupted the bee sense of your hive. That happens. That will happen if you become overly dependent on one avenue of physical or spiritual technology. It will happen to the whole multiverse as this new law of karma takes over, because the structure of the spiritual world is changing. It's no longer going to be a pyramid scheme. Those who have sat at the top of pyramids, getting their way with their subjects for millions of years and longer, are going to find that their magic doesn't work anymore. Just as happened. And I don't know how to tell you folks that think you're going to bring back some magical golden age if you can just discover the secret of the pyramids. If you can just uncover all the secrets of the ancients. I don't know how many ways to tell you that you're wrong. That's not to say that we shouldn't study that, because history is important. And knowing how we got to where we're going is very important to defining where we go from here, and avoiding repeating the same old mistakes that have been made before. Will there be some aspects of these old spiritual technologies, physical technologies that still work? Yes. But they are to be discovered through science, not through woo-woo, what I think will become thinking. This law of attraction bullshit that some people are spreading is nonsense. It is completely at odds with how spiritual energy works. The only way that their nonsense is true is to the extent that you have your own universe populated with virtual souls that are automatons for you to control. And yes, when you reach the God level, That is essentially what you are able to do if you want. But that's a complete disconnection from active creation. Nothing you do is going to make one bit of difference to the rest of the multiverse until you come up with something that's worthy of integration, of being added to the fundamental pattern, the fundamental fractal of the multiverse. Till you do, you're going to have your own little isolated fractal, your own isolated little experiment, and you can do your mental masturbations to your heart's content there. And that's going to be no different than what some of you will experience in the metaverse when it's perfected, as it approaches perfection. And the human idea of perfecting the metaverse is to basically take total control over your mind, total control over your spirit. And to the extent that it does that, that's what operating in your own universe is going to be like as a god. These virtual souls that populate what you think you are in control of actually control you. And this is the nature of possession. What we own, what we possess, actually ends up controlling us. And that's why the first creator, God, gave every other soul free will. Because God didn't want to be possessed by all his possessions. And that's what was happening to the probably first million versions of the multiverse that were created before God, maybe not the first creator, but the first one that managed to come up with a system of creation that didn't drive him crazy, came up with that, you know what? I understand how power works. I understand how possession works. And I don't want to be all powerful. I don't want to be the possessor of everything, because the possessions come to own me, not the other way around. This is true in the spiritual world as much as it is in the physical world. And I don't know of any human soul that I've met that is truly free, that is ruled by their possessions, that is caught up in a power game, a dominance game. Those folks are learning the two toughest lessons a soul ever learns is the lesson of possession and the lesson of power. And letting go of those without letting go of yourself is what the balance of life is all about. If you let go of everything, if you have no possessions, you have no concerns, no cares, that's no better than being overburdened with them. Choosing consciously what you're going to care about, what you're going to focus on, what you're going to let go of, what you're going to hold close, is the essence of every lesson that you're going to learn in every incarnation for as long as your soul exists. And you're not going to necessarily keep focusing on the same things. just within the space of one lifetime, I can tell you that my focus, my priorities have changed drastically. My political philosophy, economic philosophy, life philosophy, religious philosophy, everything has changed dramatically. And if they hadn't, I wouldn't be here talking to you now. All the gyrations that I've been through, all the dead ends, false starts, lost passions, integrated passions have served to inform what I'm trying to share with you. I don't tell you that my path is the path for everyone, but there is a path for everyone. And when you are lucky enough to choose an incarnation where all of these things, gyrations, somehow fall into place to bring you to a higher level of consciousness than you've achieved before, it's a very, very special thing. A very unique thing, a very personal thing. And it will transcend anything else that you have wanted, lusted after, desired in this incarnation. It's not going to take away the basic desires of the human form to reproduce, to have a family, to have healthy, long-lasting relationships with both sexes, with family. Those things will all remain, but they will be the embellishments of one incarnation. And you will realize that this is only one of countless incarnations, countless of those experiences you've had in many different. Just focus on telling you about my past life experiences that I've had. Give you a flavor of where I've been, what I've experienced leading up to this particular incarnation, and these particular messages I'm trying to share with you. Maybe it will spark a synchronicity, a light bulb for you that pulls you towards your path, gives you a new idea for a direction. I mean, that's all I can hope for. That's the only reason I'm sharing this. I don't have any particular ambitions. I'm not going out to promote myself. I'm not looking to make a mint. I'm not looking to get followers. Well, it's something that we all have kind of a desire to be followed, to be listened to. And I'll admit, it would be nice to know that people are appreciating what I'm doing. That stokes the ego. And the ego is something that we all have. It's inextricable from ourself. Our soul has human characteristics. Nothing that is human is not something that is part of your soul. Those that tell you that you need to divorce yourself from your ego, divorce yourself from those human emotions, are not doing you any service. They may be putting a band-aid on what may be a very difficult incarnation for you, and that's certainly a choice. If the pressures, the stresses of this incarnation are such that you can't deal with them and you want to disconnect, by all means, go become a Buddhist. Go lose yourself in the metaverse. It's only going to last for a lifetime, and the next incarnation could lead you in a very different place. But do it consciously with the knowledge that your choices do affect your future path. Not all paths are always going to be available to you. I can promise you that the vast majority of the souls incarnated as human beings right now will never reach the God level. They will find some comfortable place in the multiverse where they'll settle down and become a cog in a big machine. Probably a very happy cog, because the place where they settle is a place of comfort, a place of satisfaction. Otherwise, they wouldn't stay there. Their ego, their identity would be at odds with it. And that's the beauty of this system of karma. There's a place for every soul in the multiverse, and not every soul is cut out to be a god. Not every soul is cut out for any particular role, or if they are for a while, they may lose interest in it. And there will be opportunities to change your path if you choose. It's not going to be easy. Well, if you can imagine the path of a soul as a drive in a vehicle that's evolving, a vehicle that has a certain trajectory and which has to reinvent itself with every incarnation, because that's the nature of reincarnation. You forget, mostly. And that's part of the system. It's not a punishment, it's a feature. If you didn't forget, you wouldn't really be in a position to learn new things, to come up with different perspectives, to change your mind about things. You become more and more set in your ways, and that's how things were before reincarnation amnesia. When this game was young, souls didn't forget, and they became more and more powerful the more and more they played the game. And that frustrated the other players no end, especially the young players, the new souls who found themselves being used and abused by souls with a lot more experience, a lot more influence. And that's why karma was designed. That's why we have reincarnation amnesia. It's not a punishment, it's a leveler. Now, it's a leveler that makes more sense than if you've ever read a Vonnegut short story called Harrison Bergeron. If you haven't read it, it's in a collection of stories called Welcome to the Monkey House. And it posits a future where everyone is held back by the power of the handicapper general, whose purpose in existence is to make sure that no one has an unfair advantage in life, so that dancers are weighted down so they can't be more agile than others. Singers have gravel implants so that their voice sounds no better than anybody else. Thinkers have little devices that go bzz, bzz, to keep them from sustaining thoughts for longer than other people. This is kind of a dystopian view of what a system of karma could be. and in no way, shape, or form represents what karma is. Karma is a system that limits experiences to one incarnation, but allows those experiences to be accumulated in the spiritual incarnations that we have. Being that if you're listening to me, you're all in a physical incarnation right now, you really can't appreciate the value of this system. You're only going to be able to appreciate on the other side. But to the extent that you listen to people who have had near-death experiences, who have had exposure to the spiritual world through altered states of consciousness, through direct spiritual experience, if you listen to them and you sort out the charlatans and the bullshit from the signal from, sort out the signal from the noise, you'll find that these experiences are all consistent with what I'm telling you. And to the extent that you embrace them, you don't fight them, you internalize and you use what's useful to you and sift through the noise of what is not useful to you, you can live a much more full and productive life, free of fear, free of limitation, free to go where you want to go within the limitations of this physical incarnation, which you have to deal with. Okay, so there's going to be this metaverse where you can completely disconnect from reality and create your own reality. Fine. You're still going to be in a physical body. You're still going to need sustenance. You're still going to need somebody to feed you, to take care of you when that's not going to change. No matter how perfect they make this metaverse, it's not going to be the same as the spiritual world. It's going to be a pale reflection of it. It may produce ideas that will accelerate the development of new laws to the multiverse. To that extent, it will be productive. It will be useful. To the extent that it just causes souls to disconnect and lose interest in life, lose interest in coming back to the real world and doing anything productive in the physical world, it's going to be counterproductive and the source of increasing cognitive dissonance, increasing tendencies not to reproduce, to cut life short through suicides, and that will be as it will be. Because the souls that exit from the multiverse in unhappy ways are essentially self-selecting against being in a species whose purpose is creation, whose purpose is creating physical technologies that inform spiritual technologies. That's what this species has been up to. All this time that we've been existing without gods to give us the powers to create pyramids, to create civilizations that didn't require all the technology we've developed since, and which we're now very dependent upon. This happened for a reason. And we're not going to go back to some mythical golden age. It doesn't exist. It never did exist. It was a dead end. There's no magic time coming back. We're not going to go through a cycle of yugas. The multiverse is not cyclical. This is bullshit. This is human religion. These teachings are to make you satisfied with where the world powers want you to be. This idea of, oh, we're going into the Kali Yuga or whatever's coming next, the Age of Aquarius, all of these things are bastardizations of the truth of what is going on with creation, what is going on with this Gaia experiment, what is going on with the human species as a soul vehicle. A very special soul vehicle, but not the only one, and not necessarily anything like what the soul vehicles are going to be like going forward in your next incarnation, the choices you will beget. Not all of you will be given a chance to be human again. And not all of you given a chance to be human again will want to be human again after the experiences of this lifetime. That's all as it should be. And it's not a game that has winners and losers. It's a game that has progress. No matter what your choices are, the choices will lead to progress. Will others look at your progress and say that was a success? Well, probably not. Everybody has their own idea of good. And their own ideas of evil. This is one of the challenges that we have of sorting out whether there is absolute good or absolute evil. I believe in the latter, but not the former. There are many kinds of good represented by fulfillment of a productive role in the multiverse, in creation. There is absolute evil in the non-productive roles, in disconnecting into your own private universe, peopled by only virtual souls because no other souls really want to play with you anymore. That, to my way of thinking, is the definition of absolute evil. And this is the kind of path that I'm trying to discourage you from pursuing through your choices. And the only way that you're going to avoid going down that path is by making choices that allow you to participate in the integrated universe, which is God's universe. Anyway, I hope that stimulates some interesting thought for you. Like, share, subscribe. If you have any questions, feel free. And until next time, this is Rob Trump with the Omnis Tower. Thanks.